Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Scott Silverman is a crisis coach. He helps people with family members that struggle with alcohol addiction and with addiction overall. We talk a lot about the opioid epidemic, and we talk a lot about things that he is doing to change the way that America looks at substance abuse and the way that we treat substance abuse together. Another guy with the TED Talk. How about that? All right. He's got his own day in San Diego. We talk about that a little bit. He's been honored by CNN as one of the heroes that helps society move through stuff like this. He's got 2 books. He's got a podcast. We talk about it all. This is the guy that you want to lean on heading into the holidays, especially if you're trying not to drink, if you have a family member you're worried about. By the way, this guy's a crisis coach, and he's the president and CEO of Confidential Recovery, and he gives out his phone number on this podcast, and he wants anybody that has any questions about recovery, family members struggling with addiction, give him a call. He put it out there. I didn't. So Scott Silverman joins us from San Diego and just up north in Hermosa Beach, California, just north of San Diego, Kevin Souza.
Hi there. How can I make your day better?
Scott.
Pete.
Hey, you've already made it better by answering the phone, my man.
Well, you threatened me a couple times that you're going to be calling, so I didn't want to piss you off.
Are you in sunny San Diego right now?
Well, it's a little cool today, and there's a 2% chance of rain, so they're closing schools.
I mean, it really is. My brother lives out there in Hermosa, and it's south of you. Or I guess north of you.
North, yeah. We're just north of the border by about 20 minutes. But no, it's great. It's great weather. San Diego's I grew up here, so it's pretty consistent. We're looking forward to hopefully not getting a brutal winter, whatever that might look like. But who knows? Well, we just ignore it.
You have, by the way, speaking of San Diego, doing a little research, you have your own day in San Diego. February 19th is Scott Silverman Day.
That is correct.
And why is it Scott Silverman Day?
It is what it was is the mayor and the city council just nominated me, and I came in, and it was just a real honor. So for my work in the community and the things that I did in my past, working with people coming out of jail and prison, and women coming out of jail and prison, and working with the homeless. So it was just an acknowledgement of that work. So that was kind of cool. The county did it. They used to have like a pet of the week.
Yeah.
And I was the very first human of the week. It was pretty, it was interesting going to the supervisor's chambers, and people were pissed off going, wait, where was that Chihuahua was coming in from last week? And it was me. So, that was kind of a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah. People love pets, and it's interesting. Oh, yeah. I work in the news business, and you can say, unfortunately, right, you talk about what's going on. Hey, somebody was shot and killed. You move on to the next story. If you say something happened to a pet, you better look out, because the phone's going to start ringing and the emails are going to come in.
Right. No, the driver and the passenger were killed in the car, and the pet was injured badly. They don't even want to know who the driver and the passenger was.
How is the pet?
Yeah, how's the pet? It's interesting. When what was it? A couple of years ago, there was a couple that went to a veterinarian to get some, was it tramadol for pain for the dog, and they actually found out that the dog was injured by the owners, and they were drug seeking, trying to get some medication from the vet. So they were just filleted in the community.
Oh my gosh! They injured the dog so they could score drugs.
Correct.
Wow. I mean, hey, and that's that's how we got here. That's why I'm talking to you, because I used to do crazy shit like that.
Yeah, it's like, what's your point?
Yeah.
Well, they got delayed. They got somehow it got found out, and I think one of the vet assistants turned them in or something, and they didn't even give a hoot about the drug seeking. The fact that they would dare to injure their animal to get the drugs. I mean, it's kind of scary, but you know the behavior, and you know what happens, and it's only gotten worse. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, and you know the behavior too. You're sober 35 years, and we're going to talk about
37 actually.
37 years.
On the 13th of this month, correct.
I mean, and for me, I remember it was hard enough to get 2 days. So I'm not going to shortchange you 2 years. That's for sure.
Well, it doesn't matter. You go through stuff. You know how it is. Ever since COVID, my home group's been on Zoom, but I'm going to 3 times more meetings than I used to. But it's been an interesting time for our world the last couple of years, especially people who want, and desire, and have to have that social connection. It's been devastating. I've watched people in my home group. They're not there now, and everyone's saying, well, they went out, blah blah blah. Who's going to go get them?
Have you worked with people that have had, some serious come downs or have fallen off because of the pandemic?
Oh yeah. A lot. Because as a crisis coach, that's what I do. I'm kind of the guy that, that in my home group, I've been going there for almost, I guess, 31 years. And so I'm kind of known as the, not necessarily as the first responder, but a guy who, I give my phone number out all the time. So people call all the time and go, hey, so-and-so went out. What do you think we should do? And I said, well, what would you like to do? Do you know where they are? No. So, no, it happens a lot. I mean, I know that for a fact, a buddy of mine who's a psychiatrist, worked for the county, that the first year of COVID, 4 county employees that were psychiatrists took their own life over the separation. Because think about it, you're in the people helping people business, and you can't help people anymore, and your untreated trauma continues, which is part of the reason maybe you got in the field. It's just amplified. And that's what's happened, I think, with substance use disorders, with alcohol, with vaping, acting out, anesthetizing ourselves, domestic violence, child abuse. It's just, I did my Ending the Stigma podcast yesterday, talking to my buddy Fred, and he goes, oh my God, Scott, taking a long trip in a motorhome with you would be miserable. Because as a subject matter expert, I do have a plethora of data around, but the goal is to just help create systemic change.
Yeah, and I love that you are smashing the stigma, or working to do it, because there's so much work to be done. That's one of the main reasons of this podcast, is to, for people to be, not everybody, I know I didn't feel super comfortable walking into my first meeting, but this is an opportunity for people to drop in and hear what's going on, and hear what's on the other side of addiction. I mean, there's this great life, and now it's difficult, right, to find that great life. You got to do the work, but it really is a terrific life. I mean, I don't think about not drinking anymore. I mean, once in a while, of course, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict. Stuff floats through my mind, and I respect the disease. I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. If I walk by a Coors Light can on the ground, I'm like, that would be nice. And then it's like, wow, still got it. But, there is a real good life. Now I deal with life on life's terms, or try to, right? And, breaking the stigma is part of that, I think, just kind of putting it all out there.
No, I agree. It's funny, earlier you said people, you weren't comfortable when you went into your first meeting. I have found that anybody who's comfortable that comes into their first meeting is more than likely loaded.
Yeah, that's a great call.
Why would you be here and feel comfortable? I mean, this is just like, this is an alternative to drinking. It's a way of changing your life, but, and it's pretty depressing. I mean, there's science around this whole thing, Pete, that, you stand up at a meeting and you go, hi, I'm Scott, I'm an addict alcoholic. There is psychology behind the fact that in many ways, just doing that in some ways contributes to the stigma, A, and B, also reinforces the negative connotation that you're broken.
Wow. Yeah, I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Well, think about it. I mean, if you stood up every day and said, I'm fat, or I'm uncomfortable, or I'm ugly, or nobody wants to be with me, and you just repeated that, it's a negative reinforcement, and most people walk around with untreated trauma, and a lot of this is just anecdotal, experiential, but there's a lot of studies around it too. But I've just been doing this long enough now. It hopefully gives me a better insight to helping families, because when families call me in crisis, it's not about, hey, we were just thinking Johnny might have, they're not, the kid's on fire.
It's a crisis.
And the kid's 37 years old.
Yeah.
And the family's been trying for 15 years to do it one way. I said, well, how's that working for you? So, I try to intervene in that behavior.
This is a broad question, but what do you tell those families that call you up and say, my son Rick is 37. He's an opioid addict. He continues to steal from us and take our car to, wherever. Yeah. What do you tell them?
Well, the first thing I tell them, is your son has a disease, and if we were talking about diabetes, we would not allow your son to go throughout the day without checking his blood sugar level, and if he needed insulin, putting insulin in his body. And we would support his diet. If he needed to walk, we'd walk with him. We do all those things. But for some reason, when it comes to addiction, but when someone's deeply in their addiction, it's important you've got to set up some speed bumps. Sometimes you got to change the locks. You have to heighten your awareness. You have to change the way you communicate, and you have to listen differently. And you may even have to change your language with somebody who is, on that path and is not hearing anything that works logically. And that's where a guy like me comes in and can start to, translate a language that might be a little more helpful to the individual. But it's amazing, most relapses, 75% of relapses take place from families who get in the way. And not because they're trying to get in the way, but they're trying to love the person to wellness. And the problem is that codependent behavior, in many cases, will use the trigger words that causes someone to relapse.
So it's about language. A lot of it is.
Well, a lot of it's just listen, and a lot of it's just learning that maybe the language you're using isn't appropriate, meaning you're fighting with each other, which is only making it worse for everybody.
Yeah.
So why keep doing it? So, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
When we start to get into some of your results, we will in a second, but I want to go backwards a little bit and just talk about your story. 37 years ago, you hit some kind of breaking point or something happened where you got sober. Take us back and tell us, and don't give me your story. I don't want to waste your time, but what happened that got you sober?
To be honest, I was in a business trip to New York, and I didn't like flying. So when I flew for business, I would usually, because going back to New York, I take that 7 a.m. out of San Diego into JFK, and I drank because I could, and it relaxed me. And I really had a problem on the plane. I drank way too much at the bar, and then I got on the plane, and I ended up taking some the miniatures off the cart without, because I just didn't want to. I don't want to buy them, didn't want to spend the money, or just who orders 9 minis? So I just took them.
Yeah.
I don't want to embarrass myself and look like I had a drinking problem, at 7:15 a.m. in the morning going to New York on a full flight, on American Airlines. So anyway, I did that, and it got worse. And then I ended up actually taking some money off of the bar cart, and somebody saw me and reported me. And then when I went to get off the plane, New York's finest actually boarded the plane before they let anybody off, and I realized they're there for me. So I took my shirt and changed it real quick because I had a change in my briefcase, and then flipped my coat around. Anyway,
yeah.
They followed me out, then they grabbed me and handcuffed me, and we did a little interview. And I said, hey, look, I gotta go to the bathroom. And while I'm sitting there, I'm explaining that if you can find it, you can hang me up. And they couldn't find the money, so I got away. So anyways, that's tracking forward. I just had a week of blackout drinking, and
in New York.
In New York City, yeah. I was one of those, actually, literally I got there, I think it was Sunday night, and Thursday night, I got into some sort of situation and then passed out literally across from the train station. I mean, I was, 3-piece suit, London fog, rain jacket,
what line of work were you in? Were you in Like
Retail clothing business. My
okay.
family was in the retail clothing business, so I was there on a trip with 14 other people. My job was, we were doing some offshore bidding on some potential, cotton goods that were coming out of the Orient.
This is high end stuff.
It was a pretty good sized business. Yeah, we had at our peak. We had the family had almost 400 employees, so it was. And I grew up in the family business, so I was, in a pretty good position. But I was, I was out of control at the end there. Anyway, so that morning, I woke up and my wedding ring was on my other hand. I had knots in my head, and I couldn't find my ID or my traveler's checks I carried in those days, and my airline ticket. Everything was gone. It was like 4 a.m. So I called downstairs. Oh, Mr. Silverman, we're so glad to hear from you. When you get a second, could you come down and talk with us? So, I showered, and I had no idea. I had a full night's blackout. I had no idea what happened. So I went down. They said, first of all, we want to invite you to never come back to our hotel. I said, oh, okay. And I said, what happened? He said, well, you were picked up by New York's finest, and you were brought to us. You were completely unconscious, and we just put you on the luggage rack and wheeled you up to your room, and security has your ID, your traveler's checks, and your airline ticket. Please go see them. And again, please never come back and stay with us. So evidently it was pretty bad. Anyway, so that morning,
That sounds like it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have the idea what happened.
Yeah.
I knew I was in bad shape, and I smelled like alcohol, and I had to meet my team that morning, and I was senior VP at the time. So I just told everybody, hey, go ahead, get started, and I'll pick you up later this morning. And I got to this guy's office, and I just thought, I can't explain this. How am I going to explain this?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in his office, and I said, can I have a couple minutes? He goes, yeah, go ahead. I could use the phone. I said, and then I just realized that this is horrible. I'm not coming out of this one with an easy explanation. So I just started to think, you know what? Maybe it's just best I just stop and my own life and just put everybody else out of their misery, and myself included. And it was a warm day in New York. It was in November, and I remember the window was open in his office. So I stepped up to the windowsill, and I just started to lean back, and I was going to jump out the window.
Wow. And this is 37 years ago, like right around now.
This was actually November the 11th.
Shit. Okay.
1984. Yeah, so 37 years ago, this coming 11th of November. My sober day is the 13th because when I went to the facility, I was on some prescription meds for 2 days, so I wanted to start my sober date 2 days later, which I did. So bottom line is,
so you're leaning. Hold on. You're leaning out this window, and you're thinking about this is it. I'm just gonna go. I'm up
on the 44th floor.
Yeah.
I think it was the 44th floor, and it was a hot day. I'm sweating, and when you drink like that, every pore is just exuding alcohol smell, and I had stains on my shirt. And I knew when I got out of that office, I was going to have to meet with the team, my colleagues, and explain, because I'd actually been gone for 4 days. Yeah. Nobody knew where I was, including me. I didn't know where I was. I was just drinking in bars and getting in fights, and because I had knots in my head and my knuckles hurt, and I'm not a fighter. It was just a weird thing.
Were drugs a part of your story at all?
Only during waking hours.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
Yeah. I'm not breaking it down. I certainly can if you want to. I
mean, no. I was just curious. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. No, I was polydrugged.
Okay.
I'll give you a list if you're really curious.
No, I'm good.
So anyway, I start salivating when I get into detail. So I'm sitting there, and I remember in my head, my mom had said to me, suicide is selfish. And that kind of resonated with me that day, that morning. And then as I'm moving my butt back I was just going to lean back and think, you know what? I won't feel a thing. And I'll put it, no more, hardship on my wife. I wouldn't have to explain what my behavior is. I wouldn't have to keep apologizing every time we went out socially or went to a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something. So it was just like, oh my God, I feel great. It's going to be over soon. And then the guy walks in his office and, hey, what are you doing, man? You're going to fall out the window. And that was the divine intervention with my mom's voice in my head and realizing, we were married 2 years. We hadn't had children yet. We've been trying. So I thought, well, I hesitated for a second, and I said, I'll be right in. And then I got off the windowsill, went to the phone, called my wife. I was crying, and I said, tell Gary, who was the psychiatrist I was seeing at the time, tell him I'm ready. I'll call you in a couple hours. And we'll unveil all this to the family tonight, and I'm ready to check in to wherever he wants me to go tomorrow. And that's how I got into treatment. I literally went in that morning, Saturday morning. It was a Friday night. I flew back, and that's when my journey of recovery started.
What happened to you that I'm talking to you now, and you've got this like vibrant, positive energy? How did you? I mean, obviously you could talk forever about this, and you so eloquently can. But how did you go from the guy who was falling out of the window on purpose to the man you are now? What are some of the things you did?
Well, first of all, I did everything that was suggested, and I'd never been to a recovery meeting. I'd never gone into a 12-step program or any kind of rehab or detox. I really, I believe that this is a disease of denial, and I certainly suffered from it. And I never really had an active family member who'd been, in this kind of condition or situation. There'd been mental health issues in my family and eating and gambling, but nothing quite like this. So I never really saw it, and I wasn't really at the level of my consumption and anesthetization, if you will. There weren't many people that could keep up with me, so I was kind of alone towards the end of my drinking and using. And so when I went into rehab, I remember the first message I got. I'd been given Valium, so I wouldn't, go through any DTs or anything while I was detoxing. And I remember my very first meeting that night. It was Saturday night. It was a bunch of old guys. And they went around the circle. There was probably 15, 20 of us, I can't remember, and said, "Did any of the newcomers have any questions?" And I can remember opening my mouth and saying, I couldn't form any words, but then I said something like, how does this program work? And they said, well, just listen. And, and I thought, I don't even know what that means. So then they asked again. It seemed like an hour had gone by. And they said, the newcomers have any other questions? And I said, how does this, program work? Probably came out differently. And they go, you just need to shut up and listen. And I thought, I don't like this place already. It hasn't even been a day, And that was my first message, and I really hung on to that. So, because I knew a lot about mood-altering substances. I'm a retired unlicensed pharmacist. I understood most medication, how to mix it, when to take it. At my worst, I was taking LSD in Clearlight form, Clearlight acid, and it was dissolvable, as it came that way. And I used to use it and put it in my eyeballs so it would go through my tear duct to get to my brain quicker.
Wow.
That's how I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I like to think of myself as an inspirational drug seeker. So anyway, I did everything I was supposed to do. I took suggestions. I changed my playmates, play places, friends. I even left my family business because it was recommended that, my level of, pace that I was keeping was killing me. So I started all over. I went down to state of California workers' comp, and I found out what I was eligible for, and I got on disability, and I changed everything. My friends, the only one I kept was one friend and my wife, and that was it, my family. So I started.
You went to any lengths?
I think I went even further because it seemed like, and there's the caution to that because, in the book, it talks about don't change your bar stool, for a seat in recovery because you suffering from maladaptive behavior, compulsive obsessive behavior, that doesn't go away. You just manage it differently. So yeah, I did everything they told me to do. I worked the steps, I went to meetings, I volunteered. 4 years later, I'm getting this award at my treatment center for 4,000 hours of volunteer work. And I'm thinking, what? They were tracking, you sign in. I didn't realize they were tracking my hours. And it was just, they'd never seen that before at the treatment center. So I ended up getting offered a job to run the alumni program, which I did on a contract basis for a couple of years. So I was really involved with recovery, which was unusual because, first of all, being Jewish and then going to AA, and AA is basically a Christian-based program. I know people were criticizing me. I was in treatment. My rabbi came to visit me.
Yeah.
And he said, Scott, Jewish people do not have drinking problems. I go, Rabbi, this ID bracelet I'm wearing, and everybody around here, has a drinking problem. And I believe I do. He goes, well, God is within us. And God doesn't want us to have drinking problems. I said, well, if God is within us, he's got to be a drunken fool because I was just with him for a week in New York. So I'm telling you, I was shit-faced for a week. So God's a party animal. anyway, the rabbi really got pissed at me and he left. And
That
my
must
mom,
have been difficult though, because we're looking to
it was.
compare ourselves out, and
Oh
so
yeah.
that's the escape hatch right there. But being a Jewish guy in the rooms, what is that like?
Well, it's interesting because my sponsor was a devout Catholic, and it was funny how we kind of met. I was in treatment, he came and spoke, and he was just at the other spectrum, and I was really, I was a mitzvah that I was confirmed, but a lot of it was just because that's what I was told to do as a kid. You do this, we do this, and he told me, he says, till you learn how to pray on your knees, you're going to have a hard time getting a spiritual connection. And I said, Brian, I can't pray on my knees. I went and checked with the rabbi. He goes, no, we don't do that. And I said, but they're telling me if I don't, I run a risk of potentially relapsing. And I said, I don't want to do that. So he told me, we came up with this idea of smoking cigarettes back in those days.
Yeah.
He said, when you go to bed at night, take your pack of cigarettes, throw them underneath the bed. So when you wake up in the morning and you reach underneath the bed to grab your cigarettes, you find yourself on your knees. Just thank God for getting you through another day. That's how I learned to pray on my knees.
And that's how habits start a lot of times, throughout this whole process. So now you're the president and CEO of Confidential Recovery. You're a crisis coach. The laundry list of positive work you have done throughout the country, and in California, San Diego area especially, is unbelievable. Talk a little bit about why you think people coming out of prison, coming out of jail, why they deserve that second chance and deserve to be integrated into society.
Well, first of all, I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Second of all, I believe that there are human beings who have, if we're talking about somebody who was originally incarcerated behind some activity dealing with substance use disorder or some form of addiction, when we put people in prison, we just make the problem worse.
Yeah, there is if anybody that's ever been on a prison commitment can tell you, through recovery rooms, that it is like you show up there and they're dying. A lot of them are dying for the treatment, and they don't they don't get it.
No, they don't get it. Not only do they not get it, but in many cases, the availability of mood-altering substances in long-term incarceration facilities is significant because it's a captive audience. And, as a distributor, as somebody who used to do this for a living, selling drugs, you're going to go where it's easier, to find 100 people that'll buy your drugs versus one at a time on a street corner. Which used to be the way it was done in the old days. You go to a friend's house and a friend brought something over. But if you wanted to make some money and move product quickly, you wanted a big audience. And that's what happened, and that's the way it worked. But so, and I got involved with, this organization I started called Second Chance, and I was working specifically with people coming out of jail and prison. Everyone asked me, why would you do that? And I got to tell you, Pete, I don't know. It was just it was organic the way I got there. And being a homeless provider, it just felt right.
I mean, you're in the trenches doing this stuff. I mean, that's God's work.
It was, there were some days I was in the trenches. Yeah, I went to some weird places, but it just, once I learned more about how to work with people, I found people that were suffering from what I call long-term institutionalization, and they were incarcerated, and they suffered from what I call criminogenic thinking. Once they got out, if you could create an environment for them where you become their new gang, if you will, or their new family, or you create an environment where they can actually grow and produce and feel good about themselves and build self-esteem, you can start to really help people change directions. So, because their bad habits that they had, they're 100 times worse in prison. Because in prison, and I've not never been there, but I worked with thousands of men and women coming out of prison. Their job was to survive. No matter what they did each day, their job was to survive. And those survival skills, we taught people how to transfer those survival skills and put them into a direction that would benefit them. So all I did was kind of repackage, if you will, or redirect, or help people kind of deflect a little bit using their skill sets. Because most people who can survive in prison have a huge amount of skill sets. And we just taught people how to use those in the workplace. And we found we were getting people's jobs at a faster pace than most unemployment agencies were.
Can you give me an example of how you would repackage somebody's skills into helping
Okay.
them get sober?
Somebody, let's just say somebody was a sling, somebody was a drug distributor, okay? And they'd say, well, Scott, all I did was sell drugs, and that's what I knew. I said, okay, so let's just break that down. First of all, you're good at marketing. Second of all, you have a sales background. Third, you have a distribution system that you've worked on. And fourth, you found ways to not get caught until you got caught. So, you can escape and evade. You've got some great articulation. You're probably a facilitator. You might be a manipulator. And you've got some tremendous survival skills. So let's use some of those attributes and put them on your resume, and then use those skills to move you into a career path that will help you get to your end goal.
I'm sure it's pretty amazing to see the light come on in people and to see them use those skills to become a better person or just to contribute.
Oh, yeah. The most successful clients I ever worked with were women. And watching women who'd spent a lot of their adult life incarcerated, and if they were mothers, when they got out, their level of self-esteem around getting a job was just non-existent. I've never worked. All I've ever done is, I've raised 3 children. I said, well, let's break that down. Housing engineer, facilitator, a volunteer recruiter, a transporter, a motivator, an academic inspirator, a disciplinarian, a cook, whatever, and you list all those skills, because we used to have a big sign on the wall. I remember thinking about it, and I'm getting chills. It used to say, "I'm just a mom." And we always kept it folded up. And then when we flipped it down, there was 84 skill sets to just be a mom. And we would suggest that they pick the top 10 that they love the most. And then we framed that path, and getting them jobs was easy. I mean, getting them into career paths was easy, and then I started working with veterans back in the day, and I'm doing it now in a very big way with confidential recovery. And because veterans who had criminal histories, the veteran system would not support them. Literally.
Wow.
It was amazing. The veteran system, if you had a career path of criminality, you could not get disability, you couldn't get access to treatment, you couldn't stay in subsidized housing. So we helped them. And we were getting veterans jobs left and right. And then I got people that criticized me and saying, how is it you're getting more jobs for the veterans than the veterans providers are? And I said, you know what? You guys set up a meeting. I'll come speak to your group. So 2 months later, I go to this group. It's a funny story, I think. And they go, and they're all pissed off, going, you're making us look bad and you're taking our money. I said, my earmark money came from a congressman who nearly got arrested a couple of years ago in our community. And I said, the money was for ex-offenders who were veterans. And you don't serve that population. So I brought the money to our community, which I see as a big plus. You weren't denied the opportunity. You couldn't compete for it. And I said, I didn't even compete for it. The congressman did on our behalf because he thought the work we were doing to reduce recidivism for people returning to prison was a good thing. So I sit in this room, and they're all like humping and rumping, So what's the secret, Scott? I said, well, let me put it to you this way. What I found, and I'm a social entrepreneur, and I grew up in a retail business, so I understand helping people get to the next level because life's all about relationships.
Yeah.
So I said, what I do every day is I make a phone call to a business person who runs a business, middle management, B level, C level, A level executives, and I ask them if they'd be willing to hire veterans. Well, we do all that too. I said, well, yeah, but I ask and I do some research on the calls before I make them to make sure that I'm talking to somebody who's a veteran.
Yeah.
So all I did was ask veterans to hire veterans. That's my secret. You're all welcome to it. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, well, I bet that was part of a seismic shift, getting those guys and girls jobs.
Yeah, the path of least resistance. And then I one of my other big home runs is NASCO, which is one of the largest shipbuilders here on the West Coast. When after 9/11, getting anybody placed anywhere where there was a federal contract. If they had any kind of criminal background, you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I met a guy who did subcontract work with them, who I knew through somebody else, and we sat and met, and I explained to him. I said, people who suffer from, I call disease of alcoholism, or they're allergic to it, but the state of California considers them permanently disabled. So why don't you hire our graduates who are permanent? Most, like 90%, had an alcohol issue or substance use disorder, and use them as a minority group, so to speak, or disabled group to fit into your contract. So he went back and checked, and he said he could. His first year, he hired 40 of our graduates.
And that's, somebody caring about these people with these issues and finding a way to, like you said, I like how you said repackage, rebrand. Yeah. Because when we repackage ourselves in recovery, we really are good people who can contribute and who can make a difference. You're one of those guys. One of the things you're doing to make a difference is you talk to people about addiction versus the holidays, right? Is that what we're talking about here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're coming up on the holidays. This is such a perfect time. I'm sitting here talking to you in early November. We call it the Bermuda Triangle, right? You got Thanksgiving, you have Christmas, you have New Year's. I mean, you can even throw in the Super Bowl. What do you tell folks that either have first of all, what do you tell people that are worried about drinking during the holidays?
Well, I think first and foremost, which is something interesting that I learned, that we did a study in my old organization, a 3-year study. And what we found was it's really hard. But when people have been in the system, they usually become disenfranchised families, whether it's their behavior or the family just wants to step away or they want to build distance. What was fascinating, though, to follow up with our clients, we had the hardest time. What we found out was the largest, greatest time that people come home to visit mom, if you will, is Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So the college that did a study with us brought in like 80 interns, okay? And on Thanksgiving Day, they went through the database and started calling to check on Johnny. Hey, Johnny, how's it going? Because Johnny was home visiting his mom, and most people would put down their mom as an emergency contact. So that's how we followed up in the study. So I learned over the years, in my own experience, because I went to treatment during the holidays. Most people say, well, why would you go to treatment during the holidays? Why don't you wait till January? I said, well, I was trying to kill myself. I thought postponing wasn't going to be advantageous or work to my advantage. So what I tell families is this, and look, this is the first year kids have gone away for a while because of COVID, and now they're going to be coming home. And my sense is because of COVID and because of quarantines that people have gone through, especially young people, they've learned a lot of new tips and tricks about how to, move into consuming edibles or legalized marijuana or, vaping or, all the issues with counterfeit medication. So they're coming home now for the first time in a while. And if they had an issue before and it got worse when they were at school, when they're coming home, they're going to come home pretty hot.
Yeah.
And families are going to want to fix them. And that just doesn't work. You can't sit Johnny down after being gone for 5 months and say, okay, everyone's going to be here. And, Uncle Bob drinks a lot and Aunt Isabel, is still taking those pain pills. And when you sit down to dinner, you can't be like them. You can't drink and we don't want you taking any drugs. And if you do, we're going to kick you out of the house. I mean, those are all fighting words. Those are all trigger words. Those are all non-engagement words. Those are all shame-based words. So having that kind of conversation with a loved one just is not going to add value. So, what I suggest to families is, look, before they get home, talk about how you're feeling, talk about cares and concerns that you might have. And hopefully you've been talking with your child through the year. And if something's going on, you have a sense of it, but you may not. And then all of a sudden it's going to pop up when they get home. So rather than try to intervene on it, reach out for help. It's just not something, if somebody broke their leg, I mean, you don't go to YouTube and go, okay, Bob, hold them down. You take them to the ER. You take your son or daughter to the emergency room and let the experts work on it. So, why we do this with substance use disorders and mood altering substances and addiction, why we try to tell ourselves it's okay, we will love them and they'll be all right. They have a disease and they're in their disease, and this allergy they have to whatever they're taking is causing them harm, and we need to love them but we need to love them in a way where we're making decisions that are going to benefit them, not us, if you will. Because it's a selfish disease. The person who's doing it is selfish because they want to stay high, and the family wants them to stop, and they're selfish, but they don't know how to do it.
And now it's such a high stakes game. I mean, you talk about, you wrote a book about opioid addiction and the opioid crisis. I mean, in our book, it says, hey, go out if you're not sure you're an alcoholic and try some controlled drinking. Well, now, you can't say, hey, go out and go ahead and shoot some or snort some fentanyl, because people are dying.
Right.
So it's so important that these messages that you're passing along to parents, that hopefully people are implementing them into their care for their children, because you got to turn it over to the experts. This is life or death.
Right. Or you as a family member, thank you for that. As a family member, get educated. You talk to an expert. There's a lot of them out there. I mean, I like to think I'm one of the leading experts in the country. And, I'll take your call anytime, 619-993-2738, 619-993-2738. You call or text me anytime.
You're the man.
I'll get back to you.
Well,
so let me go to your point you just made, because I just heard this 3 months ago from this old guy at a meeting. He said, everybody thinks with willpower you can really control things. And you'll love this, Whoopi. I hope you will. He said, next time you have diarrhea, you use your willpower. It was so funny. What a great example, because it's like, you cannot control that.
It ain't happening.
Yeah, you cannot control that.
What about
anyway?
Yeah, you. I love that, by the way. Or I don't love it. So you and I were lucky enough. My first round of holidays, I was in treatment. I went to treatment for 30 days, and then I went to an extended care place, basically a halfway house, for another 5 months. So I had like 6 months, institutionalized. And I tell people it was the best thing I ever did. A guy told me once, hey, it's a couple months for the rest of your life. And I truly believe that turned out to be true. It was a great place to be for that first round of holidays. I mean, I turned to my friend Tim during Thanksgiving in rehab, and I said, "Don't ever forget this Thanksgiving." And he just looked at me with a scowl, but with a sense of humor too. Like, how could you, And Christmas, I was in a halfway house, and New Year's, I was in a halfway house, and I felt like I built up the self-esteem by not drinking during those holidays and having that tribal atmosphere with other people that were trying to stay sober. That really carried me through holidays after that. What do you tell people that aren't that lucky, as you or I were, or they consider themselves maybe at the time unlucky? How do you tell them to approach the holidays? If I just stopped drinking and now I'm faced with Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and all the bullshit in between?
Well, anybody who has had an issue with it, who decides tomorrow I'm going to stop drinking, first of all, 99% of the human race cannot do that. You just cannot do that. You cannot flip a switch if your body, mind, and soul is physically addicted to something that's mood altering. You can't flip a switch, so don't even try. So that being said, it's one of those kind of, it's not a gray area. It's black and white. You're just risking potential medical harm, and you're potentially going to make yourself sick. And if you decide, well, I'm going to switch. I'm not going to drink anymore during the holidays. I'm, going back to my home state. Marijuana is legal. I'm just going to smoke marijuana. Well, you can make yourself really sick. And, it's happening right now. Look, 240 overdoses every day behind opioids, every day, 240 in this country, every single friggin' day. That many people are dying behind opioids. And most of it's counterfeit, meaning you're taking something in your body that you think is X and it's actually Y.
We're seeing that so often with fentanyl now.
Yeah. And fentanyl, anybody can make it. Oh, you can get it online. You can get it mailed to you by the USPS. And you can put it in anything. And we're seeing it now everywhere, from marijuana to vaping pipes, in cocaine, with crack, with heroin. And, and it's being disguised in the counterfeit world, for example, Xanax. Yeah, that's one of the big ones. I mean, some people, they haven't got vitamin C yet, but eventually they will. Oh, it's vitamin C, take it. Well, if it's cut with fentanyl, the odds are somebody's going to overdose. Have you heard, by the way, of the Skittle parties?
No.
Yeah. Skittle parties are what Skittles are.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine you go to this party, everybody comes in, they bring their drug of choice, and they put it in this bowl. And at a certain time of the night, somebody metaphorically rings a bell or plays a certain song. Everybody goes to the bowl and grabs something. Well, what if one of your friends just got a bunch of counterfeit Xanax with fentanyl? So you heard about these events where people, they go to these parties, 8 people overdose, and 2 didn't survive. That's what's happened. People are just taking such risks right now. And the thing that's interesting is, in my day, there was nothing I wouldn't put in my body.
Yeah.
But the difference is the level of toxicity. And to me, when I think about counterfeit medication, it's poison. It's not even a drug. I mean, it's a drug, but it's masking something dangerous, which to me is poison. So when you think about that, as a 18, 19, 20-year-old, 22-year-old, when you think about going to a party and taking something that you don't know what it is, you could be taking poison. And what I try to just do with families is just impress upon people, because, you're not going to stop an addict. You're not going to tell a kid, don't do that. I mean, I wrote my first book called Tell Me No, I Dare You.
Yeah.
70% of the people told no, they'll stop, but they're not going to stop doing something like that. And according to science, that part of the brain, when it hears don't do something, it basically, the cheerleading section stands up and the band starts playing, going, let's go for it. So my mind is programmed. I'm wired that way.
And it's we're talking about the addict's mind, obviously.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Because you were saying, what does the other person do? The person's coming home. They have to reinforce. First of all, they have to accept the fact they might have an issue. They might have an allergy. They might be allergic to this stuff. And I try to use a soft word. It's really, they might be addicted. They might be predisposed. Some people get diabetes. Some people don't. Some people get skin cancer. Some people don't. Some people have heart failure. Some people don't. But right now, according to science, 15% of our country will have an active addiction issue arise in the next 12 months. But what's even more fascinating, Pete, is those 15%, when they're impaired or they're coming off of their impairment, they will impact 7 people negatively in their life every day.
And that's it there. Yeah.
You do the math. 7 out of 10 will be impacted negatively, and 15% have the actual, they're pulling the trigger, so to speak, on the event. That's 85% of our population
is being impacted by this stuff. Addicts are putting in their bodies.
Yeah, I mean, and our governor in California, he just earmarked $100 million to make it easier for the marijuana industry to get licensed and certified and open up shops.
Yeah,
literally 3 months ago, before his recall thing was, I think Gavin Newsom's a good governor, but where is the logic in thinking that, we've got to help the marijuana distributors? And you know what, right now, according to all of the street talk, the legal marijuana business in all the states that are legal, the business is off because the non-legal marijuana, growers are selling their product, which is just as good, for a third less.
Oh, wow.
Because they're not being taxed.
Yeah.
And if you're going to take substances in your body, and you someone says, well, this is 10 and that's 7, it's the same thing. But it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's food or clothes or shoes or cars. This is 30% less than that. It's the same thing. Which would you like? There are some people that probably proudly go into legal marijuana shops and go, I'm supporting the state of
exactly
California.
Right.
Well, not after the lottery fiasco. Billions are still being passed out and schools are still struggling. And California, we spend 50% more money on prison than we do on education. So, and I don't want to make political positions. I'm just saying.
No, you're stating facts.
It's counterintuitive to me that we're actually going to have more people probably die behind the opioid crisis over time than COVID.
That's what I wanted to get with you on the opioid crisis. So you're just saying over time more people are going to die from the opioid crisis than COVID.
Right, and we're not doing anything about it. I mean, right now we're trying to convince everybody they should get vaccinated. I'm going for my booster next week. So it's just we need to make it as important of a conversation as other things, because if we keep going to 240 a day, by the way, that is just opioids. I'm not talking about methamphetamine. I'm not talking about alcohol. I'm not even talking about, you and I haven't even talked about behavioral health, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, untreated trauma, PTS. We haven't even discussed that. And those are all things that are existing in almost every family in some way, some shape, or some form in today's world. And, our quarantine the last couple of years has made it a lot worse, especially for those who had no tools. And now their problems amplified. They still don't have the tools. And at the end of the day, the way the treatment world is working, because that was gone, it went virtual as well, which changes things. It's the social model, people getting together, talking about what's going on, is probably scientifically one of the best, but there's still a 95% relapse rate. When you went to treatment, if you did nothing after treatment, nothing, okay, but you went to the best place in the world and you spent 28 days being the perfect inpatient client, and then you got home and did nothing, the chances are you have a 95% chance of relapsing with no follow-up. That's how high it is.
Yeah. Did you see, I don't want to keep you here all day, but I got a couple other things I want to ask you. Do you see a way out of this opioid crisis? Is there a way out? What do you wrote a book on this. What did you find, as far as what we're looking at here as a country, or globally going forward?
Well, first of all, there's no vaccination for it. Okay. And it's completely apolitical. It's not a Democratic, not a Republican, not a progressive, whatever classification you want to put it. And it's not zip code specific. And it doesn't matter how much money you have or you don't have. I mean, certainly, if, certain parts of the community that are economically challenged, there might be more of it per capita. But at the end of the day, when you look at the news, you're reading about the, high level, movie star or singer or musician, or somebody who comes from a family. I just read somewhere that one of the housewives' daughter just admitted.
I saw. Yeah.
Going to treatment. So I've always believed there's hope and help. But the way this is accelerated and the fact that counterfeit medication is so wildly out there, and that, our leadership in our communities, when people ask me, I'm actually getting ready to talk to a pretty powerful group here in 2 weeks about this. We're going to, they're going to bring me in professionally to speak specifically about this, which is unusual because they want to know and they want to hear. And so the fact that you and I are talking about it, I mean, this is significant, but it has to become as much of a conversation on a daily basis as the flu, or as, getting kids the proper education, or making sure that, we have food in kids' bellies and families are becoming self-sufficient. It's got to be part of that dialogue, because with struggles and with barriers and with hiccups and speed bumps and challenges, and we've, as a world, we certainly went through a big couple of years of it. We're going to see more and more of this, especially in the U.S., because for some reason, we're a much pill-oriented society. And, think about this. The drug manufacturers, the Mexican cartels, that with the super labs, the Chinese manufacturers of fentanyl. When you think about your consumer base, if you look at this as a business model, there's nothing better than the U.S. because there's no end to our consumption of it, and we can't get enough of it. And now, because of whenever the DOJ, the DEA puts pressure, on whatever, mechanism they put it on, the border, airlines, boats, the manufacturers start shipping other countries. I mean, just 5 months ago, Australia got 2 big shipping containers of methamphetamine. And the rumors are some of it came from Mexico, some of it came from Canada, and some of it came from the U.S., loaded up at some central point. Maybe the boats met somewhere in the water, and they, loaded containers and took them to Australia. So now, and methamphetamine is, 10 times stronger than it was 10 years ago.
Wow.
So at the end of the day, that's what's going on with drugs today. Marijuana has a 90% THC content. And if methamphetamine is 10 times stronger, imagine how much stronger cocaine is.
Yeah,
so
and this is why people are dying. And by the way, we're not even talking about what you mentioned earlier, the counterfeit stuff.
Correct. And people are also dying because they're mixing drugs with such high intensity of toxicity with other drugs. And what's even worse, and this is what, when Whitney Houston passed away, remember it was Dr. Drew, that for 3 days he was yelling and screaming and upset. And he goes, look, we've had musicians and famous people and wealthy people using heroin for decades. We've never seen the kind of overdose we're seeing now. And he said, I'm going to tell you what I think it is. He goes, people in this country, or young people, Adderall, Ritalin, antidepressants, SSRIs, Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft. You mix those with street drugs, something happens to the body. And this is contributing, in my opinion, because I agree with him, to a lot of the overdoses that are going on. Because people say, "Oh, it's just fentanyl." Well, no, fentanyl is very potent. It's 100 times stronger than heroin, and morphine is 50 times stronger than heroin. So, and because the people that are putting this counterfeit medication together don't have any quality assurance that they have to maintain, and they're not overseen by the FDA or the DEA, they're making stuff that kills people. And to your earlier question about how are we going to stop this, first of all, we got to slow it down so we can have a conversation. Because if we don't slow it down, and by the way, when I mentioned the 240 people that die every day from, mostly OxyContin, other opioids as well, a couple hundred people every day normally would be dying if it wasn't for naloxone, which is in Narcan, meaning their overdose was reversed because now we have that medication that can do that. So in reality, it was last month, I think, the company that makes naloxone or Narcan, which is made with naloxone, and Narcan is the delivery system through nasal spray, said that they're out of product. The demand is too high and won't be back up to speed until February. So if you think about that 240 a day could climb to 325, 350. So, we really have to find a way to get the information. And schools don't even want to put Narcan in because they don't want the responsibility. And you got kids that are bringing fentanyl to school because their older sibling says, "Look, you carry this, I can't." Or they want to be like the big brother or big sister, and they're seeing it in schools. You saw the other day there was a family with a 2, 4, and 5-year-old that got a hold of the parents' stash of fentanyl, and one of the kids died. The other two had to have Narcan to revive them.
I did see that, yeah.
I mean, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I wish I could take a magic wand and just fix it, but, I can't.
But you are doing everything in your power. Now, before we let you go, you have a podcast, right?
I do.
What's the podcast called? I listened to it today.
It's called Scott H. Silverman Happy Hour. I used the word happy hour because, when my sponsor said, go to a meeting when you did most of your drinking, and I said, well, I drink in the morning, I drink at noon, and I drink at happy hour. He goes, okay, just go to happy hour.
Just go to happy hour. And
pick one of those three. So I kind of put a spin on it. It's called Happy Hour. And it's on the normal social media platform. And we talk about, I bring the guests in. I got, people like the DA, the sheriff, and the DEA, different experts that come in, and people in recovery, and a variety of different people and I just interviewed a guy. He wrote a book called Prehab. It's kind of interesting, the whole concept about the disease itself and how to, how the assessment tools that we're currently using, even with the DSM-5s, aren't necessarily going to help somebody if they're not 100% willing. And he said, have you ever met an addict that's 100% willing to get better?
Yeah.
I said, not yet. Not that wasn't, handcuffed to a gurney in a coma. They're pretty motivated.
So you got the podcast. You have a couple books. We're going to link all this to the podcast. We're going to put up here tomorrow. And you got a TED Talk. I mean, you were a CNN hero. You're a guy who is making a difference out there. And the fact that you spent a little time with me today, and continue to move the needle in the right direction, means a lot.
No, I appreciate that. I hope so. And that's why I gave out my phone number, because it's amazing how many people.
Hey, more people listen to this than you think, pal. I hope it's ringing off the hook.
Hey, I want to drink from a fire hose because, every time, and I'm one of those people, a lot of people, my wife's in real estate, and every time she sees a strange number in her phone, she goes, I see a strange number. I picked up your number.
Yeah.
I see it as an opportunity to avoid going to a funeral.
Yeah. And that's the truth.
That's how
man.
I look at it.
That's a business.
So I love
in.
it when people call. I put my phone up at 9 o'clock when I go to sleep, and I don't get it till the next morning. But I return every phone call, and if there's anybody out there that I can help, and if I can't help you, I promise you I can find a way to help point you in a direction to get help, because it's everywhere. And people don't realize that. And those 3 hardest words in the English language is I need help.
Yeah, Scott,
people avoid it.
You're a mensch, dude. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete. I really appreciate it.
All right, and I'll send you this link tomorrow, man, and we'll get it out on all the social media platforms. And we're going to talk a little bit about this on KWTX station I work at. So I really appreciate you, dude.
Call me anytime and bring me back anytime. And by the way, when somebody calls you and says, "Hey, should I really call this guy?" You go, "You better call him." Otherwise, I won't call them. But they call me. They will hear from me. We'll talk about it, and anything that I can do to help the family navigate next steps. That's what I'm all about.
All right,
Thanks
man.
for the opportunity.
You got it, Scott. Thanks, brother.